So, you know, an extension of that boundary work is like, what happens when boundaries are crossed in such an extreme way that trauma is created, right? And so cross boundaries can bring trauma. Lots of other things can bring trauma. So I want to start with just a very, very broad definition of trauma, okay? So actually, let's go ahead. So trauma is painful feelings or experiences from the past that get stuck. And so that means that they're held in our memories and in our bodies. The experience, the thoughts, the feelings, it's like they get crystallized in time. So that's one very broad definition of how we can look at trauma, something that has that crystallized, that stuck because of pain. Okay. So, you know, I'm going to go back and see like what happens when some of our boundaries are crossed or that we have, you know, what things that create trauma. You know, we feel not seen or heard. We feel disrespected. We feel like we didn't matter, that we did something wrong. Sometimes we really internalize and it becomes instead of others doing something wrong, we did something wrong. It's hard to trust others, and it's hard to trust ourselves and our own reality. We feel angry, we feel scared, and we may not know what to do. So those are some of the things that happen when boundaries are crossed. And you know, some of those boundary crossings can lead to trauma. And I want to talk about when we talk about trauma, I think we might be familiar. We're pretty much familiar with the word triggered, but there's actually kind of distinctions around experiences that I want to go into. Triggered versus activated. And I want to give you this because I actually found this very empowering, because there's something around like, you know, the word triggered or trauma that feels disempowering to me. And when I realized that there were some things, it was like, oh, I wasn't necessarily triggered, but I was activated. That actually was like, oh, okay. And it helped a distinction and a clarity for me. So I'm going to go over this distinction. When you're triggered, you can think about triggered as your body, your thoughts and feelings are acting. Everything is sending messages that the trauma, the original trauma experience is happening right now. So you may feel overwhelmed. You may feel your breath, like your body reacts, may tighten. Your shoulders might come up. You might brace, right? You might actually even leave the moment and have a flashback, see or hear something from the past right now. You might shake or cry. And you might have heard of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So fight is a trauma happens and the urge is to, you know, to be aggressive or to defend, right? Flight is to leave the situation and just kind of like go. Freeze is literally that you could just freeze, like totally. And fawn is one that's actually just been added to this. And fawn is, you can think about it as a very intense form of people pleasing or codependence or doing something to calm the situation, calm the part, like to fawn to make it okay, right? So again, triggered is happening to you in the moment and you may not have control over the experience because it's so present right now for you. Now, activated is a little different in that your body, your thoughts and feelings remember the past trauma, but you're still in the present moment and you are able to make choices. So you may feel some of the same sensations. You may feel sensitive or hyper aware, fearful, uncomfortable. You can also experience the fight, flight, flee, or fawn. But the difference is that since you are still in the present, it means that you have some capacity, you have some availability to yourself to be able to help yourself. Okay, so I'll give you an example for in my own kind of lived experience is that, for a while I thought, I came from a rage-filled, family background, and I would have, I knew that I was very sensitive when people, particularly men, uh, had a certain tone in their voice, when they got angry, right? And for a while, I really felt like the trauma of that, because I would just like tense. But then I realized, like, just through work, through my self-work, that like now I feel like I am still activated by that. That didn't go away, but I don't necessarily go back to the moment like I did. So you might have an experience of like with trauma healing that it may not go completely away, but that you do move from a space of triggered and not being able to help yourself in that moment to activated and have an intense sensitivity around it. This is why our language and making sure that we're really mindful and respectful of what might be triggering or what might be activating to people. But I just wanted to share that. And
how can you like tell like yourself when it's happening? Like if it's a trigger or if it's an activation? Because I feel like once you're in that moment, it's really hard to like tell and like analyze the situation in the moment. So it's like, I don't know.
yeah, I mean, there's no pat answer for it, but what I would say for myself, the ability to be able to help myself is a key piece for me. So, I would, earlier in my healing, in my younger years, I wouldn't be able to tolerate a situation. I'd have to completely like leave for it. And now I don't have to do that. And so my ability to be able to stay tells me the difference. And so the other part is that like the way that is, and again, I'm going to take, if you were to know me, like every word out of my mouth, it all comes back to self-care. It's always self-care, is that you learn more and more of your own responses and when you are okay and when you are not okay, right? And if you're tuned, into your mind, then you can tune into your feelings. So self-awareness, a practice of awareness, is one that if you have trauma in your lived experience, it's a very good practice because you learn to be mindful of yourself. And if you're mindful of yourself, then you know how to care for yourself. So in one way, I would say that it is, less about the words triggered and activated than how much are you able to care for yourself? And wherever you are at, I believe that you can reach for care. So, there's some things that are so traumatizing that when we're triggered, it really does feel like we just froze and we can't really do anything. But part of why I think that we even do this work or even talking about this is to have like this mindfulness of like, okay, I am a survivor. I'm somebody that this has been my lived experience. So how do I help myself? Right? What are some ways that I can help myself outside of that particular moment so that when I'm in that moment, because we don't know when we're going to be triggered or activated, right? That we have some strategies for ourselves Okay. So I actually do, these are some great, this is great. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about some strategies for self-care around trauma, but I would love, if you have something to share around this, please put it in the chat if you feel comfortable. We also are going to come back in a couple of minutes, once I'm done with this share, and we can share. I think it's helpful for us to hear each other around this. Okay. Yes, a toolbox. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to share. Okay, so where did it go? There we go. Okay, so some of you might be aware of this, this practice. This is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So one of the things that you can do is that when you are both triggered or activated, it works for both, is if you can help yourself, is first, what are the 5 things that I can see right now? Okay, so I'm going to, there's chair, there's lamp, there's carpet, there's computer, there's this, you just name. What can I see? 4 things you can touch. Okay, I'm touching the computer, I'm touching this piece of paper. All right, what do I hear right now? Like you might have to kind of like, if it's quiet, but is there something outside that you hear? And then smell or taste, you may not be able to do that, but really this is about engaging your senses to bring you into the present moment. Because again, like what I was saying before, like particularly with trauma, you leave the moment. And so this is an exercise to be like, whoa, okay, I'm not that kid, it's not 40 years ago for me. I'm not her right now. I mean, she's me, but I am in this moment. And in this moment, I have this here, I have this here, I have this here. What this does is it actually also, it brings mindfulness. So this is a mindfulness technique. It will also help you to regulate your body and when you come into the present moment, you can start to kind of become present in your body. So this is the next one, is around being in your body. So you come into the moment and then you can breathe deeply. For me, I always go back to the breath. And I'm asthmatic. So I have like, an intense relationship with my breath. So when I'm in emotional distress, I can't breathe. So just breathing, and I'll do a breath. Like I'll first identify where's the breath in my body. And generally for me, it will be all up here. And so I will I'm like here, it's all this way. So I don't try to force my breath, but I will try to just like bring it a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper down. If you're able to, coming into your belly, being able to bring your breath into your belly is very powerful in terms of feeling grounded and feeling okay. Some other things that you can do is you can just stretch. You can just even say, I'm in my body, I'm in the present moment, and you can just move and be in your body. You can walk, you can dance. Self-touch. So one of the things that I do for myself, and this is like even beyond trauma and activation, just how I care for myself, is that when I was young, my abuela, she used to have this, like when I would cry or I was hurt, she would be like, ay, pobrecita, and she would just like stroke me. And so now I do that for myself. I'm like, well, ay, pobrecita, and I feel sometimes silly, and I felt silly when I started it, but I was just like, oh. And that's like, it's self-soothing because you are activated. Your body is actually like this, right? So just soothing. And then I think Hamida put earlier, like, I think it was Hamida, about like having a blanket, So I'd have like this pink blanket. I'd be like, like you do what you need to do, right? The other, some other things are be in your spirit, whatever that means for you. That can mean meditation, that can mean art, visualization, praying, doing ritual. I light a candle a lot, and that's very soothing for me, and it brings me into this moment. It makes me also feel safe, right? So these are some things that you can do to get into the moment, to be mindful, and to get into your body, and to get into your spirit. Okay. And then very importantly, just I'm not alone. I'm not alone in my experience. When we can't help, sometimes there's times where we can't help ourselves. And so, I really encourage for you to know, to take such good care that when you need, you need family, friends, teachers, therapists, spiritual mentors, other safe people, and that you have for you a way of getting help and getting support, right? So it's our own self-care, and it's reaching out. These are, there's lots of techniques, and there's, we could break these down and do also another workshop on these techniques, but these are the most simple, and also in my experience, just very effective in my own experience as a trauma survivor. And so, make that toolbox for yourself. If you are someone that, experiences trauma or activation, have that toolkit ahead of time. Think about some of these strategies, like how could you be more mindful? How could you be more present? Make up your own way. These are just some thoughts, but anything that brings you into the moment, now, and brings you into your body, empowers you, right? It empowers you to care for yourself now, right? Regardless of what your experience has been. So I want to move into our closing. So what what I'm hoping is that today you got something for yourself, whatever that might be, that moves you more into self-care, and that moves you more into empowerment. So that's the prompt, and you're welcome to share on it or not. My question to you is, from today, what are you taking that's either bringing you into self-care or is making you think about your self-care, or that feels empowering to you, or how are you going to empower yourself around that? So self-care and empowerment. Is anyone who would like to share? Could just be one thing you're going to take from today.
Nonviolence.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, that one's powerful for me, but it's tricky to practice. Oh, the sentence of nonviolent communication. Yeah. Yeah,
that was really clear. I took it as, and it made me feel, next time I need, would you? That's really helpful framework, isn't it? To be able to, if I can remember them things, then I can really have some sort of conversation that's not, attacking, or doesn't make me feel guilty. Right. Is that what, yeah?
Yeah. And, it's a simple framework, very specifically, because when we are in a position of needing to communicate a boundary cross or a confrontation, we're scared, we're angry, we have emotions happening. So it's made very simple so that you could just bring it into this, while you're sorting through the emotions and all of that. Because otherwise we go this way in terms of articulation. So it keeps it simple. So thank you, Amita. You also said something earlier that I really liked about compassion, and that it also allows us to communicate what we need, but then also thoughts around compassion for ourselves and compassion for others It makes that possible when we find a way to communicate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the compassion of being able to maybe hear someone make a request and then think, hang on, are you practicing nonviolent communication? Let me imagine you are. Let me just, I feel angry, but let me just calm down for a second and imagine, especially if it's someone you know loves you. Hang on. Maybe you're just saying, maybe you're trying your best to be really assertive right now. Let me help you make this go well,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yerin said here one thing she learns about was the difference in being triggered and activated. And Yvette said this was her first time learning about this, and same for me. So thank you.
Triggered versus activated. Yeah, it was for, that was something. So I took a trauma-informed care for coaches and therapists, and that was really like, wow, it was eye-opening, because I was like, oh, and again, like I told you, like I felt like a little bit more empowered and more like, okay, I'm activated, I can help myself here. And then I also have for myself when I'm not okay, like I know, like actually I can't bypass this right now, or I can't, like I'm not okay, like I need to actually reach outside of myself in order to be okay. So just some tools.
Right.
Yeah.
And me and some of the sisters, when we've spoken in the past, just had these conversations around, if you can't tell what's happening because you just don't have the wisdom on it, you just can't find the key, and it could be some conflict between you and your mother or you and your friend, and if you can't find the wisdom around it, go to someone you trust. And I do this. If I can't find the wisdom around a situation, like, was this person really being mean, or were they genuinely like trying to ask for something? If you can't find the answer to it, go to someone you trust, someone you know will give you really good advice and talk it through.
Yes. And I actually didn't, there was one more slide that I wanted to share that I think is really important. So here are some resources that I wanted to also leave you with, in addition to your toolbox. And this is really like if you need help outside of yourself. So the Trauma Survivors Network, I really try to pull resources that have a variety of different types of resources and tools, both therapeutic as well as other access to other types of care. So the Trauma Survivor Network, suicide prevention lifeline, right? In those really dark times. And then complex trauma. This was also something that in learning about trauma, this was one of the things that I learned about was complex trauma. And basically this is multiple traumas on top of each other: generational trauma, economic trauma, racial trauma, violence, right? Like you can have many different types of trauma. And so then that creates complex trauma. And this resource gives you just some, because not all trauma resources address that. Yeah, but what happens if you have multiple, right? So I found that was a really good resource. So I wanted to leave you with that today. And thank you all so much for showing up, for your vulnerability, for your willingness, for your self-care. And I've been honored to be in the room with you.